Well, from the culture of entitlement over at the state broadcaster to the culture of entitlement on a wider scale. You know it's out there. Promoted earlier that we were going to speak about Margie Gillis. You remember Swan Hands and the millions that she got from the government, then didn't want to defend it. Well, before we get to that, I want to revisit something we've talked about already on the show, and that's the concept of this movie that the Alberta government funded that slams the oil sand, and a ridiculous response from a minister in charge. But first, John Robson is with us in studio. John, first off, the idea that the government is going to go out there and they are going to give what is close to $250,000 to fund a movie that just belittles and tarnishes the image of the main economic engine. It would be like Ontario funding a movie about how evil the car industry was. Not cars, the car industry.
And what makes you think they haven't?
Well, they may have, but I just haven't heard about it yet.
The problem here is the notion that the government ought to be promoting the film industry. Once you swallow that, of course they can't exercise discretion over content, because that would provoke cries of censorship and of an attempt to create bias in the industry. The former would be untrue, but the latter would be quite reasonable. The government would be handing out money to people it thought would make it look good, and it certainly shouldn't be doing that. But you're going to get this unless you accept the premise that the government is not in the film business.
But so assume you've swallowed that the government should be. Hollywood doesn't randomly, pick everything. Hollywood is the film business of the world, and they don't just say, "Oh, you've got a movie idea. Here's money. Go make it." They actually pick what they like, what they think is good.
Yeah, exactly. And Hollywood picks what they think people will want to watch, or things that they're prepared to lose some of their money on because they think it's art. And that's fine, because at the end of it all, Hollywood studios flourish or fail based on whether or not they persuade people voluntarily to give them their money. And so it's vox populi. What they do is to ask consumers, are you enjoying what you're watching enough to give us cash? But people who get money from the government are not doing that. They're getting money from the government because they can't sell enough tickets to make a living. And therefore you are getting stuff that actually doesn't appeal to people.
Well, which is why, other than being on the nature of things, another state-funded enterprise through the federal government, David Suzuki's Nature of Things, I doubt many people would have seen this movie.
Now, I mean, that's a classic, though, David Suzuki, right? Chewing on the hand that feeds him ferociously. Oh, Canadian governments, their policy's terrible, and the government's giving them more money. David, tell us again what bums we are. Because once these things get created, of course, they get captured by that kind of person, and you can't stop it, but why would you want to do it?
Well, let's bring in the Culture Minister for Alberta, Lindsay Blackett. He was on Charles Adler's show last night, and Chuck asked him, what's going on here? Let's roll this.
We've got enough people like Al Gore and others, professional dirt disturbers, who want to hurt our economy. We don't need the people who are elected by our people hurting the economy, helping the bad guys. That's all they're asking for. And if you weren't in power right now, if you weren't a minister, you'd be with me on this one.
I've been with you on a lot of those comments. I've made them publicly as a minister, and I don't have to like it. That's the situation, is what it is. And I hope that we'll look at this in the future, and hopefully we'll have the courage to go make some of those changes.
Well, courage is something that a minister ought to be exercising now instead of sort of covering it like a pundit, but we'll agree to disagree on that.
Hopefully we'll have the courage to change it. He's the minister in charge in a majority government.
Yeah, I know, it's funny, where you talk about yourself as though you should have a bystander at your own existence or something. and he said other things along these lines about how we need to have the discussion in Alberta and across Canada, or it's controversial and it takes will, and right now there's no will. But you're describing yourself. If you think it's a bad thing, have will, right? Reach inside yourself, find the fortitude to say, this is a bad thing, government policies should change, I'm going to go tell the Premier that, I'm going to try to make changes in my ministry. Don't sit there waiting for political will to descend from on high upon someone else or you. You're the minister, okay? This is it.
Politicians with no backbone. Now to somebody with a lot of backbone and a lot of chutzpah. Margie Gillis, the hand dancer, didn't like being questioned about her millions in grants to her and her foundation and her art. She's not used to this sort of thing. She's used to people telling her how great thou art. And she's now saying, let me bring up this quote board for you, John. This is the Vancouver Observer, a small online publication. It says, I think the station, that being our station, Sun News Network, I think the station should be taken off until they can prove that they represent Canadian values.
You know, to which my immediate response is, okay, lady, you do the hand dancing and we'll do the political philosophy, because we don't say stuff like that. First of all, if we're taken off the air, how are we going to prove anything? This is so totally ridiculous. Secondly, how do we prove that we represent Canadian values? Do we convene a panel of hand dancers to see whether we proved it or whether we merely created a probability or in fact failed abysmally? And third, what are Canadian values? I'll tell you what they're not. Censorship. You don't silence people you don't agree with. Now look, I will say for the record, I thought the interview was somewhat aggressive. You know, not because I think that people like Margie Gillis shouldn't be asked point blank, hey, if you can't sell tickets, if people don't want to see your dance, why should you be on the public dime? But because when you bring a guest into the studio, they are a guest. And so, you know, I thought Crystal was a little rough with her. That's fine. You know, different people have different styles. But to try to get us taken off the air because of the fact that you didn't like the interview, why don't you just walk out? I looked on the Foundation website, by the way, and Margie Gillis is clearly great because it talks here about her as she has earned rave reviews, worked with the greatest dancers and artists of her time, passionate and steadfast, unique approach to art, member of the Order of Canada, Knight of the Ordre National du Québec, cultural ambassador, masterful interpretation. Her work continues to develop. Hey, shrug off an interview, lady. You're that great. You're not going to go to bits because Krista Erickson pushed you a little hard on the question of why you're trying to live at public expense instead of getting out there doing a dance with a hat in front of you and getting people to put money in it. And then the Foundation apparently is devoted, here's it is, to manifest in dance a personal vision of the human condition, to have compassion for our weaknesses and vulnerability, to celebrate and encourage our capacity for hope, creation, wisdom, our power for healing, inspiration, truth, and generosity, and to shut up our enemies. Come off it. Healing, generosity, dance for us. And I understood from the interview that her dance was all about bringing people together and reconciliation. You don't turn around and say, hey, get the government to yank him off the air, which is, of course, using the policeman's truncheon. Where's the compassion? Where's the healing? Where's the transcending of barriers between people in that? This is hypocritical.
Okay, we're out of time, so I have to cut you off there, but I can't leave without saying this. The reason Krista Erickson invited her on the air in the first place, remember, is that Margie Gillis went into a federally funded arts institution, the National Arts Centre, at a federally funded arts award and said, we're not a compassionate country because we're not giving artists enough money. She disparaged the name of the entire country because we don't give artists enough money. That's what started this all. That's her and her compassion. Send us your thoughts on this. Send us your thoughts on Robson. Byline at sunmedia.ca.